Welcome to Natural English Talk.
Hello, and welcome to Natural English Talk. I'm Anna.
And I'm Jake. It's good to be here.
I was thinking this morning about how the day starts before we even leave the house. Everything is so rushed, isn't it?
It really is. I feel like I'm always halfway out the door while I'm still trying to finish a sentence.
Exactly. This morning, I was looking for my keys, and I just called out to Mark, "What did you say to me about the mail?"
Did he hear you?
He did, but as I said it, I had this tiny moment of doubt. I wondered if I should have asked what he told me instead.
I know that feeling. Sometimes say feels a bit detached, like you're just asking about the words, but tell feels like you're asking for the information.
Right. When I asked what he said, it felt like I was focusing on his voice in the hallway, but later, when I was in the car, I kept thinking that if I'd asked him to tell me where the mail was, it might have felt more direct.
It's funny how a three-letter word can change the mood. If I'm rushing and I say, "Tell me the time," it sounds almost like a command.
It does. It has a bit more weight to it. "What did you say?" feels lighter, almost like I just missed the sound of it.
I had a similar moment with my roommate. He was explaining his schedule for the week. I just nodded and said, "Okay, you said you'd be late on Tuesday."
And did that feel right in the moment?
For a second, yeah, but then I caught myself. I felt like I was just repeating his words back to him. I felt like I should have said, "You told me you'd be late."
Why did that feel better?
Because it felt like we were sharing a plan, not just making noise in the kitchen while the coffee was brewing.
That's the friction, isn't it? In that morning rush, you want to be clear, but you don't want to sound like you're giving orders or being too cold.
Exactly. You're trying to connect while you're putting on your shoes. It's a strange balance to find.
I think I spent the whole drive to work replaying that one sentence. "What did you say?" It sounded okay, but it felt a little distant, like we were two people talking past each other.
It's interesting how those small choices linger with you long after you've left the house.
They really do.
It doesn't really stop once you get to the office either. I spent most of my afternoon staring at a draft of a message to my supervisor.
Oh, those quick messages can be the hardest ones to write. What was the hesitation?
Well, I wanted to mention a change in the project timeline. I started typing, "I need to say that the deadline has moved," but it looked so formal on the screen, almost stiff.
I see what you mean. "Say" in a message like that can feel a bit like a public announcement. It lacks that personal touch.
Exactly. So I deleted it and tried, "I wanted to tell you that the deadline changed." But then I worried, does tell sound too blunt? Like I'm just dropping bad news without any cushion?
It's a delicate line. Tell is very direct because it points straight to the person receiving the message. You're giving them information, and that carries a certain responsibility.
That's exactly what I was feeling. I kept hovering over the backspace key. If I say something in a chat, I'm just putting the thought out there. But if I tell them, I'm making sure they know it.
I've done the same thing with my team. Sometimes I'll write, "Did anyone say when the meeting starts?" because it feels less like I'm blaming someone for not informing me. It feels more like a general question about what was heard.
That's a good way to put it. Say feels like it belongs to everyone, while tell is just between two people.
Did you end up sending the message?
I did. I went with tell in the end, but I added a few extra words to soften it. It's strange how much mental energy goes into choosing between two tiny words just to make sure a colleague doesn't take things the wrong way.
It really shows how much we care about the tone of our digital voice. You don't want to sound like a robot, but you don't want to be vague either.
Right. You're trying to be professional, but you're also trying to be a human being on the other side of a screen.
And sometimes, the more you look at the words, the more they start to look wrong, even when they're perfectly fine.
That happened to me twice before lunch. I ended up second-guessing a simple update about a lunch order.
It's exhausting, isn't it? That constant self-editing in the middle of a busy day?
It really is. You just want the message to land softly.
I had a moment like that today during my coffee break with Sarah. We were just sitting there, finally relaxing, and I started to tell her about a movie I saw over the weekend.
Those breaks go by so fast. Did you find yourself caught on a word again?
I did. I was in the middle of a sentence and I said, "The main character says his friend that," and I just stopped. It felt like a physical bump in the conversation.
Says his friend. Yeah, that does sound a bit off when you're right in the middle of a flow.
I immediately felt that little spark of friction. I corrected myself and said, I mean, he tells his friend, but the rhythm was already broken. Sarah didn't even notice, but I felt like I'd stumbled over my own feet.
It's funny how we notice it more than the person we're talking to. To you, it felt like a mistake, but to her, she was probably just waiting to hear what happened in the movie.
Exactly. But I stayed in my head for a second. I started wondering why save felt so natural to use there, even though it was wrong. I think it's because the characters were just talking.
I do that too. I'll be halfway through a story and I'll use say when I really mean that someone gave specific information to someone else. It's like my brain just picks the simplest word for speech.
That's it. And then, because I corrected myself, I felt like I was drawing attention to the way I was speaking rather than what I was actually saying. It makes the conversation feel less natural for a moment.
I've had that happen where I just keep going, hoping no one noticed. But inside, I'm thinking, I should have used tell there because I mentioned the person.
It's a bit of an exposed feeling. You want to sound effortless, especially with a friend. You don't want to sound like you're still practicing.
But I think that's just being human. Even native speakers trip over their words or change their minds mid-sentence.
True. Sarah just kept drinking her latte and asked what happened next. She didn't care about the say or tell part at all.
It's a good reminder that the message usually gets through even if we feel that little internal glitch.
It is, but I still walked back to my desk thinking about it.
That feeling of overthinking really intensifies when family is involved, doesn't it? I called my sister last night and we were talking about some family news.
Phone calls with family can be so much more emotional. You're listening for every little shift in tone.
Exactly. I was explaining what my mom had mentioned to me earlier, and I said, Mom said that she was feeling a bit lonely lately.
That sounds like a heavy thing to share.
It was, but as soon as I hung up, I started debating with myself. I wondered if I should have said, Mom told me she was feeling lonely.
It's a subtle difference, but told me feels much more personal, doesn't it? It's like she shared a secret directly with you.
Right. By using said, I felt like I made it sound like a casual comment she just threw out there into the air. I worried that my sister thought I wasn't taking it seriously enough or that I was being a bit cold.
I know that doubt. Tell carries that weight of a shared moment between two people. If someone tells you something, they are trusting you with it. Say can feel a bit more like reporting the news.
That's exactly it. I didn't want it to sound like I was just a reporter. I wanted my sister to know that it was a real private conversation. It's strange how after the call ended, I was just sitting there in the quiet, replaying that one sentence.
It's funny how we judge ourselves so harshly after the fact. You were probably just trying to get the information across, but the inner voice starts questioning if the warmth was there.
Yeah, I actually almost called her back just to rephrase it, but then I realized I was definitely overthinking.
We want our language to match our heart, especially with the people we love. When the words feel a bit off, it feels like our feelings are being misrepresented.
It really does. It made me realize that tell is often about the connection, while say is often just about the words themselves.
That's a very grounded way to look at it. Even if you felt that doubt, I'm sure your sister just heard the care in your voice.
I hope so, but it definitely stayed with me for the rest of the evening.
I had a similar feeling of doubt today, but in a completely different setting. I was in a budget meeting and I found myself drifting away from the numbers because of how my colleague, David, was speaking.
Meetings are the perfect place for that kind of silent observation. What did he do?
He was presenting the new figures and he kept saying things like, the department tells that we are over budget, or the data tells that we need to cut costs.
The data tells. That sounds a bit personified, doesn't it?
It does, and it made me start second-guessing my own habits. I usually say, the report says we are over budget. Hearing him use tell without a person following it made me wonder, wait, am I the one doing it wrong?
It's that classic meeting tension. You're supposed to be focusing on the spreadsheets, but instead you're mentally comparing your grammar to the person with the microphone.
Exactly. I was sitting there nodding my head to show I was listening, but internally I was running through sentences. I was thinking, can a report tell, or does it only say?
I do that all the time. If I hear someone who sounds very confident use a word differently than I do, I immediately assume they know something I don't.
That's it. David sounded so sure of himself. For a few minutes, I felt this internal friction, like my instincts were failing me. I started to wonder if the report says sounded too informal for a high-level meeting.
It's a lot of pressure to put on yourself in the middle of a presentation. You're balancing the actual work with this constant silent language check.
It really pulled me out of the conversation. By the time I realized I was overanalyzing, he had moved on to the next slide. I had to ask him to repeat the last point.
So the language choice actually caused a tiny break in the actual work communication.
It did. It's funny how we can be our own biggest distractions. I was so busy judging the say versus tell usage that I almost missed the actual point of the meeting.
It just goes to show how much these small words are always buzzing around in the back of our minds, even when we have much bigger things to worry about. I had a much faster version of that today. I was just out for a walk and a tourist stopped me. He looked a bit lost and asked for the nearest pharmacy.
Oh, those interactions are so quick. You don't really have time to plan what you're going to say.
Exactly. I pointed down the street and said, "The sign says it's just around the corner." And then I added, "I tell people to go there because it's the biggest one."
That sounds perfectly natural for a quick exchange on the sidewalk.
In the moment, it felt fine. He thanked me and walked off. But as soon as he was gone, I started replaying it. I thought, I tell people? Does that sound too important? Like I'm some kind of local expert giving official advice?
I think we've all had those post-conversation reviews. You're walking away and your brain is just stuck on one word choice.
Right. I wondered if I should have just said, "I always say it's the best one." Using tell felt so definite. It felt like I was giving him a command rather than a friendly tip.
It's the lack of time that makes it stressful. When you're talking to a stranger, you want to be helpful and polite, but you only have a few seconds to get the tone right.
And there's no chance to go back and fix it. He's already a block away. I'm just standing there on the pavement thinking about the difference between saying a tip and telling a tip.
It's interesting how we judge ourselves so much more after the person is gone. To him, you were just a helpful person on the street. He probably didn't give the word tell a second thought.
I know, but it's like my inner voice wants everything to be perfect. Even a 10-second chat with a stranger becomes a case study in my head.
It's that desire to be seen as we intended. You wanted to be the friendly local, not the bossy one.
Exactly. It's a lot of weight for a stranger to carry, isn't it?
I actually had a similar moment of reflection very late last night. I was winding down by watching a documentary, and I found myself focusing more on how the narrator was phrasing things than on the actual subject.
I do that too. It's hard to switch off that part of the brain once it starts noticing patterns. What stood out to you?
There was a scene where an old explorer was being interviewed. He kept saying, "They say the mountains are dangerous," but then he followed it up with, "But let me tell you what I saw."
That's a perfect contrast. It feels like he's moving from a general rumor to a personal truth.
It really was, and I just sat there in the dark, thinking about why that sounded so powerful. I realized instinctively that "they say" felt like a distant echo, just general knowledge, while his "tell you" felt like he was leaning in closer to the audience.
It's amazing how we can feel that difference without needing a dictionary. It's just a gut feeling, isn't it?
It is. But the friction came when I tried to explain to myself why it worked. I spent about 10 minutes trying to put it into words. I knew it sounded right, but I couldn't quite articulate the rule in my head.
That can be so frustrating. You know the flavor of the word, but you can't describe the recipe.
Exactly. I felt like I understood the soul of the words, but I was struggling with the logic. It made me realize how much of our language is just feeling. It's about the space between the speaker and the listener.
I think that's why we get so caught up in it. We aren't just looking for the right word, we're looking for the right distance.
Right. If he had said, "They tell the mountains are dangerous," it would have ruined the whole atmosphere of the scene. It would have sounded so mechanical.
And if he said, "Let me say what I saw," it would have felt like he was just reading from a script instead of sharing a piece of his life.
It's a quiet realization, but it stayed with me until I fell asleep. Sometimes the most common words are the ones that carry the most hidden meaning.
It's funny how those thoughts follow you. Tonight, before we started, I was just sitting in the quiet for a moment, thinking back on all these little slips and choices throughout the day.
It's a lot when you add it all up, isn't it? From the kitchen this morning to the TV late at night.
It really is. I felt a bit unsettled, actually, just realizing how many times I've hesitated over say and tell in only 12 hours. It makes the way we talk feel so delicate.
I know that feeling. It's like discovering a new gear in a machine you've been using forever. Suddenly, you're very aware of every movement and you wonder if you're doing it right.
Exactly. You start to see these words everywhere. They aren't just grammar, they're how we negotiate our space with other people, whether we're being direct or soft or just sharing a rumor.
But I think there's something beautiful in that awareness too. Even if it feels a bit heavy or confusing in the moment, it means we're paying attention to the people around us.
That's true. The fact that we care enough to second guess ourselves shows we want to be understood. We want our words to land in the right way.
And maybe it's okay if it's not perfect every time. The friction is just part of the process of connecting.
I like that. It's less about following a rigid rule and more about feeling the rhythm of the day.
Well, I think that's a good place to leave it for now. This has been a very reflective day for both of us.
It definitely has. Thanks for listening to Natural English Talk. I'm Jake.
And I'm Anna. We'll talk again soon.